It's Pete from Cheap Homesteading, and I'm in the garage today, and we're going to get my chipper shredder going. I just picked it up. I paid about $125 for it. I looked everywhere for a good used chipper, and I couldn't find them. They wanted top dollar for them, and to get a new one was like $1,000 to $1,400 just for a homeowner one. So I finally tracked one down, and we need to get it running. It doesn't run very well, but I think it's basically just a carburetor clean and clean out the fuel tank, and we should be good to go. These things don't get used that much, and they sit in someone's garage, and then they don't run anymore, and then they sell them for cheap. And cheap is my price, so I finally tracked one down because they are hard to find, really. Not everyone has one in their garage. So it starts, but doesn't start and run very well. So we got to take the carburetor off it and clean out the fuel tank, and we're going to fire this sucker up and see how it runs. Okay, so the first thing you want to do, you got a piece of equipment that's sat for a long time and it doesn't run right. The carburetor is gummed up. Do yourself a favor. Go take the fuel tank off it, take the carburetor off it, take it all apart, clean it, put it back together, and if you adjust it right, it'll run as good as new. Pretty much as good as new anyways. So just do yourself a favor, or you'll be fighting with the sucker for the rest of your life, trying to get it started, and no one wants that. Okay. There's not much in there. I can already smell it. The fuel is really, really old. So we're going to flush out the fuel tank with fresh gas a couple times. Okay, so now we're going to start taking the carburetor off. Okay, so you don't have to go out and spend $1,000 to $1,500 for a chipper. If you're going to go out and buy a chipper, like a homeowner's chipper, you might as well buy a used one and not pay $1,000, pay a couple hundred. Now look at this. That air filter has been coated. So I'm going to change that out. I'm going to have to go get one. I don't have one here. You don't really have to remove it, but it gives you a whole lot more access to the carburetor. Okay, so now remove this pin that holds the float. Make sure the float doesn't have any liquid in it. And remove the needle. I think this thing really does need a carburetor kit for sure. Okay, so I'm going to remove this jet. So I'm going to screw it in but count the turns. It's 3/4 of a turn. So I'm going to remove it now. So it's 3/4 of a turn from the seated position, screwed all the way in. And I'll set that down and I'll mark it. 3/4. Okay, so this one's your main jet. And I'm going to screw it all the way in. And that's about 3/4 of a turn. So when you put it all back together and run it, that'll be your base adjustment. You'll screw it to 3/4 of a turn, and it'll probably run there, and then you got to adjust it from there. But look at all the junk that's on the needles. That is crazy. We're going to clean all this up and get some new gaskets. Put it all together and it should run. Is spray in all the holes. And spray in all here. And in here, every hole, you have to put carburetor cleaner through it. And sometimes you've got little tiny holes on your in your venturi in here, and spray them. Okay, do you see that? The junk that came out of that? That's awful. So now we're gonna get the blow gun and blow out every single hole. The center. Where your needle goes. Inside this tube here. Every hole you see, you have to try to put carb cleaner through it and blow it out. So there you go. We got the main body of the carburetor clean. Okay, when you're going to blow this out, you have to make sure that you don't lose the seat that's in here. You want to make sure that when you blow it out, it doesn't come out of there. I blew out all the holes, but there is a whole bunch of corrosion still in here in the seat. I'm going to clean this really, really good. We're going to clean it up. I'm going to get some gaskets, probably a new needle and seat, and we're going to reassemble this thing. Hey, I picked up some parts. I got some gaskets. I got a new float bowl and a new needle and seat kit. I found out later when I was in a bit of a quieter environment that I could hear there was liquid inside of the float. So I'm going to go change that out, and it comes with, when you get a new one, it comes with a nice plastic one. So that probably won't happen again. You see all this corrosion on the carburetor? I like cleaning this off. I don't like little chunks running through my jets. Jets are really, really tiny holes, and it really doesn't take much to plug one up. So I don't like leaving any dirt or any rusty corrosion on the inside of the bowl, if any way I can help it, because I don't want that working its way through the jets. I'm changing the needle seat, and the seat sits in the bottom of here, and it's a little bit of a rubber piece, and it looks like that. And you definitely have to remove that. Get that all cleaned out. If you have an older carburetor, there will be a brass seat. But if you look down, you see a little white seat like that, that's got to be removed. Okay, so now now we'll get the needle and seat kit. So it comes with a new needle, a bowl gasket, spring, and a little sealing washer. And they're all little parts, so you have to be careful. You get your new seat, you set it in the hole, and you put the little piece that's a little groove to the bottom. And I find if you use a nail, you just shove it down in there and it goes perfect. Okay, so now, and then you just make sure that it is fully seated. So now we get our needle, and there is a little tiny holder, and it clips onto the needle like that. Okay, so you have your needle and you have your bowl, and there's a little tab, and you put the needle and the little holder on the other side so it holds it there. Hold it, you let the needle fall into the hole, and you set the bowl down, and you never want to force down on it. You just want to set it there. So now you get your pin and you slide it into the first part of the bowl. Don't shove it in so far that you can't put your spring in there. You gotta watch out. I'm almost losing this thing a few times. So then you kind of fish it into the hole like so. So now you fish it into the hole like that, and you shove your pin in just a bit more before you lose your spring, and then you get it where it slides in like this. So make sure that it moves freely. That's what you want. You don't want it to be sticky or anything like that. You have your spring in here with your little pin, and when the bowl's on, this pin can't fall out. Okay, so you make sure that this space goes towards your actual float so it can move up and down, because that's what that's for, so it gives it space to move a little more up and down. So what you're going to do is put your bowl gasket in your bowl, and then I just go like this. So you get your main jet and you screw it in, and that's what actually holds your float, your bowl, everything together is your main jet holder. So you give that a little bit of a turn. You don't want to tighten too much. It goes into aluminum. You got to be very careful you don't do that, but just nice and snug. Okay, so now when I took these out, this is your low jet. It's been cleaned off. There is a little rubber washer and a steel washer, and make sure they're there. That's what the spring sits against. You screw it in, and you screw it in until it bottoms out. Do not over tighten it. Don't just screw it tight. You just want to stop when it stops. So the amount that I counted it before was 3/4 of a turn. So now I got to turn it out 3/4 of a turn. That's my base adjustment. So same with my main jet was about 3/4 of a turn. So I'm going to screw that in till it just bottoms out. Then I do it 3/4 of a turn. So now we're ready to install this back on the chipper. You want to clean up this gasket. You want to make sure that you get all of it off so that it can seal properly. I'm going to slide these bolts in. Slide this bolt in. I'm not going to stick them through too far, but I'm going to have enough to set my gasket on them. Okay, so you get your little throttle linkage, and I already marked which hole it was in. It's really important before you take it apart that you mark the hole, and I made a little line towards it. Now you got to get this in and make sure you do not bend this rod. Take your time and fish it through. Now we're going to hook up the fuel line to it and put the clamp on. Okay, so now we're gentle. Now we will slide these through just a little more so the carburetor stays there. I'm going to hold the nut up and get my little stubby screwdriver. Okay, don't tighten it up all the way yet. I kind of tightened it so it's solid. Go to the other side, get the other nut, and this one's going to be a little harder. Little trick here. Now we're going to tighten them up good. Okay, so now we're going to tighten it up good, but whenever you tighten these down, make sure you tighten them evenly. Don't just tighten one up real tight and then tighten the other one up. Just tighten them a little more, a little more, a little more, a little more, and then tight. And then it'll be nice and solid. Make sure that your throttle moves freely, your choke moves freely. So we're pretty much on our way. I do still have to pick up an air filter, but I forgot. So we're probably going to try this out anyways. It'll still run. Put your wing nut on. We're going to go and clean out the tank. So now we're going to take the fuel tank, we're going to put a little bit of gas in it, swish it around a bit, dump it out a few times so we know there's nothing in the tank. Because nothing worse than you clean the carb, have it all off, it's running good and you want to go use it and you suck something else out of the tank. That wrecks your day. So we're going to go do that. Just do this a couple times. Okay, so you look in and it looks nice and clear. You're all good to go. So we're gonna reinstall it. We're gonna hook up the fuel tank now. But where it was going into the rubber for a while, it's made the rubber kind of swollen. So I'm going to cut it off. So I'll have a new part of the hose. The only problem is you don't want to cut too much off that it's not going to go on, but I know I have a little bit of extra. So we hook this on, put our clamp in. And put the screws in, and you got to be careful with these screws. They aren't really, they're only going into plastic, so don't go too nuts with them or anything. There's that, there it is. Yeah, when you're tightening them up, you don't want to have it too, you don't want to tighten these up too much, just snug. Okay, so I'm going to fuel it up. We're going to check the engine oil, make sure there's engine oil in it. I'm going to want to change the oil, but for now, this is what I am going to do. The engine oil definitely needs to be changed, but it's good enough to start it. Okay, we'll turn the choke on. Throttle to run position. Make sure you have a screwdriver ready. We're going to give this a try. Okay, so you want to get it running long enough till you make sure the engine gets warm. Then you start trying to adjust the carburetor. Normally the beginning adjustments is enough to get it running and running to a decent level. So we're going to try to adjust this sucker. Okay, so your main jet and your idle jet. I basically screw them in all the way, set it to 3/4 of a turn out, 3/4 of a turn out. That's your base setting. Whenever I get it running, I kind of use the choke. Once the engine is warm, I keep playing with the choke until I get the engine warm. And the last time, if I'd shut the choke off, it would die. So you know the choke is making it richer. So I screw the main jet out a bit till I can get the choke off. And then after that point, when it's running, I unscrew the main jet and count the turns, which was about 1 turn out, and then the engine would start to sputter. And then I would screw it in about 2 turns, and it would start to sputter. So then I would turn it 1 turn out. So you're trying to aim for the center between rich and lean. You find center and you turn it back just a little bit more to the rich position. Then I start putting it to idle.
it doesn't really want to idle, so you try to adjust it out a little bit till it will idle. So I do the same thing with the low idle jet. I turn it out till it sputters, and then I screw it back counting until it sputters going the other way, and then I turn it back to the middle. And then I'll let it run, and then I will adjust it a little more till it idles really, really nicely. And then that's about it. You got to remember, when these things are under load, if it feels like it's running out of fuel, you might have to open the main jet just a bit more, because they run totally different under load. So there you go, it runs pretty good. I'm hoping I'm going to get lots of chipping out of it this weekend. It looks like there's a big snowstorm coming, so I guess spring hasn't decided to come yet. So you guys have a good one.